Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced 2 federal by-elections for September, one in Winnipeg and one in Montreal. Both are in high-stakes areas for all major parties.
Every election matters. We have strong candidates in both of those ridings.
Canadian people have clearly lost confidence in our costly and incompetent Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. You can spread the message far and wide across Winnipeg and in particular in Elmwood, Transcona.
Right now I can tell you that people at the doorsteps, they say they want change. There is a wind of change that's blowing very strongly right now, and they're looking for an opportunity to have something new.
The Montreal riding of La Salle et Marne-Verdun is a stress test of a historically Liberal stronghold, coming after the Liberals lost a long-held seat in Toronto earlier this summer. Meanwhile, the NDP are looking to hold on to their seat in the Winnipeg riding of Elmwood, Transcona. It was made vacant when NDP MP Daniel Blaikie left the seat to work for the provincial party. The 2 races are now underway, with the results sure to help set the tone for the House of Commons fall sitting. Time to bring in the Monday Power Panel. Brad Levine is a former communications director for the NDP. Larissa Waller is a former director of communications for Ontario Premier Doug Ford. And here with me is Cameron Ahmad, former head of communications to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Hello and welcome, everyone. Cameron, I'm going to start with you on this one. There's lots of speculation about what the Liberals should do to hold on to this Montreal riding. What do you think they should do to prepare?
Always lots of speculation, especially with by-elections. That's not gonna change anytime soon. I mean, I think as they've said, they have to take this seriously. They have to put as much effort as they can into it. The whole Quebec team needs to work hard, along with the Prime Minister and the great candidate that they have there, to win over the trust of people and treat it like it's a real election. It's not something that they can take for granted. I mean, right now, obviously, it's a struggle for the Liberal Party. That's not a secret to anyone. What I think they should try and do is put the pressure on the Conservatives, right? People are frustrated. Naturally, they're looking at the opposition for an alternative, but we haven't really heard anything specific about what Pierre Poilievre would do, especially in Quebec, especially in a context where there are some real concerns that people have: healthcare, gun violence, investments in social programs. All he's really talked about is platitudes at this point. If the Liberals are successful, they'll be able to put the pressure on him. He's shown he's able to win, transform his popularity into election results in Toronto. He has to try and do that now in Quebec and in Manitoba. Put the pressure on him, try and get him to actually explain specifically what he's going to do to make life better for people, other than just, banking on people's anger.
Well, Larissa, Cameron says the Liberals should put the pressure on the Conservatives. Typically in a by-election, you'd think that script might be flipped a little bit, but maybe not so much after the win in Toronto. What do you think the Conservatives should do to make inroads in Montreal?
You know what? I actually would disagree with the premise of that question. I think what the Liberals should be doing in that riding is putting the pressure on the NDP. I think it's fair to assume that that riding is not necessarily what a political party would consider a target seat for the Conservatives. I think there'd probably be wide agreement that the chances of a Conservative win in Verdun are pretty small. What I'm really interested in seeing is if the NDP, with their candidate, I believe his name is Craig Sauvé, who is a municipal politician, widely popular. If I was a Liberal in that riding in Montreal, I'd have my sights set on him. And the NDP, I understand, should work very, very hard. They need a reset in Quebec, and this could be it.
Well, I think a lot of people were saying the same thing in advance of the Toronto-St. Paul's by-election, that the Conservatives would be happy if they just had a strong showing, but they didn't. So, Brad, what do you make of that point, that it's the NDP who should be facing the pressure here?
Yeah, no, I agree that Craig Sauvé is a very strong candidate for the NDP, and a by-election affords the opportunity. But I like the expectation setting there. Very low for the Conservatives, very high for the NDP. Well done. Very good. Listen, the pressure is on the 2 incumbent parties in these 2 by-elections have the most pressure. That is, we have to put the by-elections in some context here. This is coming off this by-election. These 2 by-elections are coming weeks after the Liberal Party of Canada just lost Toronto St. Paul's. That was an upset. They cannot afford to win, they cannot afford to lose 2 safe Liberal seats, one in Toronto, one in Montreal. The pressure is on Trudeau to win. If Trudeau does not win the safe Montreal seat, then the speculation, those calls for him to step down are only going to get much louder. For the Winnipeg seat, that's a classic New Democrat conservative fight. And I think the expectation here is that Singh must hold on to that seat. He cannot afford to lose any traditionally safe NDP seats in Western Canada. And I think that if the Conservatives do pull out a victory in Elmwood-Transcona, there's going to be a lot of calls for Singh to wrap up the confidence and supply agreement arrangement with the Liberal government.
Well, on that note, then I'll turn to you again, Cameron. What's at stake for the NDP in this Winnipeg by-election? One would expect they would get perhaps a little bit of a boost from the popularity of Wab Kinew's NDP government there.
Yeah.
What's at stake?
Quite a bit's at stake, I think, especially for the observer class, people such as ourselves, who place a lot of emphasis on these by-elections. But I think it's also important to remember that they are not by-elections are not necessarily indicative of what's going to happen in general, right? We're still a year and a half out from a general election. People think of by-elections differently if they think about them at all. I mean, we have a turnout problem generally. People tend not to pay too much attention. You saw a slightly higher turnout, I think, in Toronto, but generally speaking, people are not as, they're not paying as much attention, especially in summer months around a by-election when there's only a local focus on it. So at the end of the day, what I was saying to Larissa's point is, you have to make elections about choices, right? And I think what the Liberals should be trying to do here when it comes to Montreal is make it about a choice between, here are some popular things we've done. You may be frustrated. You have every reason to be angry and frustrated about the way things are going in the country, but here are some things we are doing to make your life better. Here is the threat that the Conservative Party faces. Here's why you need to compare the policies and put the pressure on them to actually talk about what they're going to do. The NDP can do a similar thing in Manitoba because they are contributing to some of the accomplishments of the government right now through this agreement, the historic agreement that the two parties have. So the stakes are fairly high, but I think after the by-elections settle down, Parliament comes back in the fall, people will move on fairly quickly, and we'll have a potentially completely different scenario and ball game in a few months.
I don't know if I buy that people are going to move on quickly from the results of these by-elections.
Depending on the results, but I think we have to remember the context and remember as well that there's so much else that will happen and could happen, as we've just been alluding to in the past few weeks. News happens fast these days.
That's for
right?
sure. It's sure to. Larissa, I want to turn to you to Brad's point. Winnipeg, is that seat a winnable one for the federal Conservatives?
I'd normally say no, but I think it was yesterday Pierre Poilievre held a rally in the riding with over 1,000 people attending. The Conservative candidate is an electrician. He's a union guy. And I think it's a mistake to compare the federal NDP to the NDP of Wab Kinew. I think the federal NDP has moved so far to the left. I think it's more of an activist social justice party now than it is the party of the blue-collar worker. I think those blue-collared workers are looking to the Conservative Party and liking what Pierre Poilievre's saying about affordability. But also when we're talking about Winnipeg, we got to talk about crime. We have to talk about drugs. And I think Pierre Poilievre is the only one who's showing that he even understands the problem. He understands the fear that communities are feeling, and he understands that, the community is looking to the federal government for action on that.
And Brad, to that point, how concerned should the NDP be about the Conservatives in that riding?
Well, the Conservatives have held that riding in the past, and when Daniel Blakey first ran in 2015 for a seat that his father held for many, many years, the Conservatives, and Daniel just beat out the Conservatives by a few hundred votes. His plurality grew in the subsequent two election campaigns. So this is a neck and neck kind of riding. I don't want to. It's traditionally been held by the New Democrats, but it's certainly not a safe NDP seat where they can count on it regardless of the conditions that they face. I think what Poilievre is attempting to do is make this Elmwood-Transcona by-election a referendum on the carbon tax. He called it a mini referendum. We'll see what the residents of that positioning has for the seat. But the Conservatives should be in a very comfortable position here in that riding. So I want to counter the expectations in LaSalle-Marne Verdun.
Everybody's trying to keep the expectations low.
I want to put that there because it is traditionally a very competitive riding, and it is an opportunity for people to send a message. And Cameron is absolutely right that people may use the opportunity of a by-election to send a signal, but then when the general election comes, they may retreat back to their traditional voting patterns. That's, I think, exactly what happened in Toronto St. Paul's, and that's why I think the Prime Minister's got the most to lose in these two by-elections.
Okay, well, on that note, shifting gears back to the Liberals, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland continues to face questions about her own job.
I absolutely take the point of view of our caucus, of my caucus colleagues, really, really seriously. I feel I have the support I need to do my job and to focus on what my job is, which is delivering for Canada and Canadians.
She was asked today about recent media reports citing anonymous Liberal MPs saying they want to see Freeland shuffled out. On Friday, the Toronto Star reported 4 unnamed Liberal sources specifically calling for Freeland to go, saying, quote, "Clearly what's happening is not working." Then on Saturday, the Toronto Star published a response piece, this time citing the names of Liberal MPs willing to go on the record in defense of Freeland, saying they're, quote, "troubled by the public smearing." What does the power panel make of this infighting on display in the Toronto Star? Cameron, I think I'll turn to you again for that one. A house divided can't stand, a leaky ship perhaps can't float. What do you make of this sort of tit for tat?
Pick your metaphor.
Yes.
Look, I'm sure my friends on the panel have all been in a place like this before. When times are tough, you see people on your side sometimes feel like it might be helpful to go to the media and speak in whispers and criticize your colleagues. It's not helpful to anyone. And frankly, if you want to criticize the Deputy Prime Minister that way, I would say put your name to it and come out and or talk about it privately. And that's something that a caucus that's a healthy democratic institution is able to do, is have those conversations privately, especially people who've been in a team together for a long time should be able to do that. And certainly in my experience have been able to in the past. I think I wouldn't call it tit for tat. I wouldn't call it a bunch of MPs coming out and publicly supporting her equivalent to a few people, you don't know who they are, behind the scenes complaining. And the other thing I'd say is, sure, the Liberal Party's facing a tough period right now. That's obviously the case. Pointing the finger at one person or one player in the team is not going to fix things, is not going to change anything fundamentally. They need to take this time right now in the summer, focus on what's not going well, how can they address people's concerns, and spend all that time talking about internal matters, actually focusing on the real opponent, which is the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, who, yes, is doing well in the polls right now, but is yet to offer any credible alternative on how he's going to make life better, other than banking, again, on people's anger. The Liberal Party should be spending its time fighting that.
Well, Larissa, what does it say then about the mood of the Liberal caucus where this sort of thing is happening? There was some suggestion in the follow-up piece that just some MPs are getting skittish about the Tories surging in the polls.
Oh boy, I don't know where to start with this one. So I'll start with this, right? You have anonymous MPs going to the media because the PMO isn't listening to them. After the by-election in St. Paul, so many MPs were saying, we need a caucus meeting, we need a caucus meeting. And PMO has said, sometime in September. I think that you'll see a lot of caucus members of the Liberal Party, expressing that that's not good enough. Their voices aren't being heard. But by and large, the Liberal Party doesn't have a Chrystia Freeland problem. They have a Justin Trudeau problem. I just read that the polling in the Star with Abacus that went over the reasons Canadians don't like the Liberal Party and Justin Trudeau, and I didn't see Chrystia Freeland's name listed anywhere, right? These are policies driven from the PMO. There's issues around inflation, there's issues around crime, there's issues around cost of living, but then there's also personality issues with the Prime Minister. He's deeply unliked across the country, and making Chrystia Freeland sort of the effigy of his dislike is not going to play out well for him, and ultimately he's the problem, she's not.
Well, on that note, Brad, what do you make of the Finance Minister's response? We just heard a little bit of it.
Well, I quite liked the fact that she got, or somebody got, MPs who are willing to put their name next to it to say that they support her. But this is clearly a caucus divided. Now, these anonymous ones. I mean, there's 4 backbench MPs who got overlooked for the last cabinet shuffle. They are likely going to be in ridings which are gone and have nothing left to lose. And that's a very dangerous a group to have in your caucus when they've got nothing really left to lose, and start attacking from within. It's got to be managed quickly, and it's got to be managed fully. You cannot let this stuff fester because, we're talking about the by-elections here. Who wants to go and support a party that is infighting, and the second most senior person, the Deputy Prime Minister, is being targeted? It's true that the problem is Trudeau and not Freeland, but they're going after her. That is a significant problem within a caucus. But they, for people who don't have the courage to put their name to it, I don't know if there's more than just the 4, or if those are the only ones that picked up the phone and started to do that. If they lose LaSalle-Mard, there will be more than 4 in the newspapers following that.
I've got to jump in there. I want to thank our power panel, Brad Levine, Larissa Waller, and Cameron Ahmad. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.